Hey there, I'm Adrienne, transformation coach and your go-to gal for navigating grief and loss. On this show, we're not shying away from tough conversations. Let's talk about how we're really feeling and how to show up in our lives even though so many hard things have happened. Loss and grief are tough topics, but witnessing each other's pain and getting really honest about what we want our lives to look like in our next chapter is the way forward. You're not broken. You deserve happiness. And even though you might not think that's possible, or even feel like your life is over, I'm here to show you that you can feel peace, purpose, and joy again. Let's talk about all things change, loss, and grief, and how to move forward so we can create a life we love. Welcome to the Living with Loss podcast. Hey there, welcome back to the Living with Loss. I'm Adrienne. Today we're talking about self-care and how grief can impact our ability to engage in self-care. If you've been through anything difficult, or if you're currently grieving something, you know that it becomes really challenging to take care of ourselves after hard things have happened. So I want to dive into why that's the case and then what we can do about it. If you listen to this podcast, you know that grief isn't just about losing a loved one. It can come from so many different life changes, like losing a job, going through a breakup, a health crisis, or even just a big shift in identity. There could be loss of dream, loss of routine, you move to a new place. So many things can cause us to grieve. So it's important to recognize that all of these experiences can trigger grief. No matter what kind of loss you're dealing with, it is valid. I'll say that again. No matter what kind of loss you are dealing with, it is valid. And it's okay to feel like it's hard to take care of yourself during challenging times. So again, today we're going to talk about why self-care can feel so impossible when we're grieving, and I'll share some ways to make it feel a little bit more accessible. I wanted to talk about this because I am someone that has wellness routines and rituals. I know what works for me as far as taking care of my body, my mind, my soul, what brings me joy. I have been practicing a lot of these different things for years, and what I do on any given day may vary slightly, but there are certain things I do every day. And even having these habits, these rituals, these routines ingrained in me, when things get really challenging, sometimes the first thing that starts to slip is taking care of myself. So I know if I struggle with this sometimes, and this is something that has been a part of my life for a long time, deliberate practice of taking care of myself, then I know others have to struggle with it too. Grief, it can really challenge us through emotional exhaustion and overwhelm, right? Like if you are grieving, there are days where you just feel exhausted. It's like carrying around an invisible weight all day long, and it can make the easiest, simplest things feel overwhelming. If you are in the early days of grief, you probably know that there are days where remembering to eat is a challenge. Taking a shower is a challenge, right? These basic things can become very difficult. When you're emotionally drained, these simple tasks, again, cooking for yourself, taking a shower, getting out of bed, it can feel like climbing a mountain. It's not that you don't want to take care of yourself. I know that because I am aware of the fact that I'm not doing the things I normally do, and I want to do them. It's just I don't have the energy to. It's not that you don't want to take care of yourself. It's just that you can feel so exhausted that doing so becomes impossible. Grief also causes us to have brain fog, decision paralysis, right? Like our brains could just get really muddled, can be hard to think clearly. You can find yourself staring at a to-do list. Like you know you have things to do. You're staring at the to-do list, and yet you can't quite figure out what you should do next. That brain fog can make everyday choices feel overwhelming. You know that you need to eat something, but figuring out what to make, now that's the impossible thing. So you just don't eat. It's okay if this is happening to you. It won't last forever. It is a common experience in grief because your brain is so preoccupied with processing whatever your loss is. Grief also causes identity disruption. When we lose something or someone important, it can change who we are or how we see ourselves. The things that mattered to us, like our routines, our hobbies, the way we took care of ourselves, might feel meaningless all of a sudden. This disruption in identity can make it hard to figure out what self-care even looks like now. You might be asking, who am I now? What do I need? And that can be really confusing. The thing is, when you go through something really challenging, or if you're grieving, I want you to look at self-care through the lens of what you need right now. You're not who you were before the thing happened. You're not thinking the same way. You're not prioritizing things in the same way. But yet, we tend to try to default to the way that we did things before. And that's just going to become frustrating for us when we don't stick to it, when we don't do it. So ask yourself, what do I need right now? And to really simplify things, think about it in the terms if you were a small child. If you were a small child in that moment, what would that child need? That's where things like hydrating, eating something, getting some rest become really obvious. But when we're looking through the lens of what do I need, and then we're stuck and we don't know, it feels impossible to make a decision or to do something for ourselves. So take that step back. And self-care doesn't have to be this giant, huge routine that you always did, like waking up at 4:30 in the morning and you're journaling and you're getting your workout in and you're doing all of these things that you did before. Yeah, that's too big for where you're at right now. That doesn't mean you'll never do those things again. It just means take a step back and just make it really, really small. What do I need right now? It's okay if your self-care needs change along with your sense of self. It's okay if your self-care needs change as you're grieving. It's okay if what you need right now isn't the same thing that you needed last week. The important thing is to check in with yourself and make adjustments. A lot of times when we consider self-care, right, it's become this buzzword, self-care, and that kind of drives me a little bit crazy because really all self-care is, it's asking ourselves, what do we need? What do we need in this moment? What do we need to feel cared for? It's not necessarily manicures and bubble baths, though it can be. Sometimes when we're struggling or we're grieving, we've lost something, we can feel a lot of guilt, right? We lack self-compassion for ourselves. We might think, why should I take care of myself? Everything's falling apart. It might be easy to think that you don't deserve to feel good or that it's selfish to focus on yourself, especially if you have other people that you have to take care of. But the truth is, you need care more when you're struggling than you do when you don't. So it's important to practice self-compassion. Talk to yourself the way you would a friend. Remind yourself it's okay to take care of you. That whole put your oxygen mask on first on an airplane before you help anybody else. This is true here. You have to take care of yourself, or you can't show up as yourself for the people that need you. If your world is falling to pieces, things are super difficult, you might be struggling with the belief that you don't deserve to feel better, or maybe self-care is somehow indulgent or unnecessary. And these beliefs, they can be really powerful, but they are not true. You deserve self-care. You deserve to be taken care of, whether it's by you or somebody else. You deserve to be taken care of, even in the middle of grief. In fact, you deserve care, especially in the middle of grief. I want to offer a reframe. Rather than thinking of self-care or doing something nice for yourself, taking care of yourself is somehow self-indulgent or selfish, think about it as a way to honor what you're going through. Honor yourself as you're going through this challenging time. It's not something frivolous, it's not unnecessary. It's an honoring of you in this moment of what you need, and you're giving it to yourself. Sometimes self-care might feel challenging because it may mean facing the pain. Self-care requires us to slow down a little bit, to check in with ourselves, to see what we need. And sometimes it can be easier to stay busy or avoid it altogether. If you're not checking in with yourself, if you're not asking what you need, you're not tuned in with how you're feeling, you're not tuned in to what's upsetting you, to what's uncomfortable, to what's challenging, whatever emotion is kind of bubbling up for you, you're not really in tune with that. And that can be easier. I know for me, I can like out busy and outwork anyone when things are falling to pieces for me. It's just easier for me to keep myself occupied on something else than deal with the turmoil. Yet I have all these tools, these tactics, these trainings, these certifications, all of these things, right, that have taught me to do things differently. And yet my default, until I really pay attention to what I'm doing, is to stay busy, so I don't have to think about everything else. By stopping, by slowing down, by checking in with yourself and allowing yourself to care for yourself, that can bring up a lot of emotions. And maybe you don't feel ready to deal with those. That's normal. But if you're avoiding checking in with yourself, being in tune with how you feel, what you need, that's not going to make the challenging emotions go away. That's just going to stuff them down until another day. And believe me, that other day will come back around. Have you ever found yourself like crying and you don't know why? Have you ever found yourself stomping around having a bad day, but you can't quite put your finger on what's going on? It's all that stuff you're avoiding. It's all that stuff you're trying not to deal with. Just because you're not dealing with it doesn't mean it goes away. It just kind of goes below the surface and then it creeps back up. So while in the moment, checking in with yourself, figuring out what you need, that can feel challenging, that can feel emotionally turbulent. It's essential because that turbulence, that challenging feeling, it's not going to go away. It's just going to come up again later. I want you to think about the idea of starting small. Again, you're not who you were before the challenging, hard thing happened. You're not doing the same things you were doing. You're probably not engaged in the same routines. So just start small. Get really, really small with it. Drinking enough water, not skipping meals, going for a walk, taking a shower, talking to a friend. Really small, especially if you're very early in grief. So with that in mind, let's rethink what self-care means. It really can be as simple as deep breathing. Taking a pause, taking 3 deep breaths, just focusing on your breath, drinking a glass of water. One thing I like to do when I'm struggling, whether it's I'm grieving or something else is going on, I like to get a really big container for water, like a hydro flask. And no, depending on the size of it, I have to drink 1 full container to have the appropriate amount of water. Or maybe I need to drink 2 if it's a little bit smaller. And I know if I can get through this container or 2 containers of this today, then I've hydrated properly. Rather than trying to keep track or like, when did I last have a drink? To carry that bottle of water around with you all day and just sip out of the same one. And then just drinking enough water, hydration, that's self-care. Just sitting with your feelings for a moment. Like if you feel some turbulence in your body, maybe some tightness in your shoulders, you can feel that you're tensing your jaw, stopping and checking in with what's going on in your body and just giving yourself a moment to reflect on it, to feel it, to let it pass through. That's self-care. Self-care is really about what feels nourishing and supportive to you right now. It could look different every single day, especially when you're grieving, and that is perfectly okay. You want to give yourself permission to let go of the shoulds when it comes to taking care of yourself. It's not about doing it right. It's about what helps you get through this moment. And when you're a little bit later in your grief journey, when it's not just about survival, getting through the day, kind of meeting those very basic needs of self-care, you can start looking back at things that are going to help you thrive, be the best version of yourself, not just survive, not just get through the day, but step back into thriving in your life. If you're really early in your grief journey, that might feel like a lot. If you're further along, maybe you're habit stacking. You're doing more than one thing for yourself every day to take care of yourself. You've got that morning routine back. Maybe you have a shutdown routine at the end of the workday or before you go to bed. But if you're really early in grief and you're struggling, just make it simple and let it be different. Know what you need and do that. It is really important to focus on small, manageable actions that feel doable. So again, today self-care could be making your bed, could be taking a shower. The making the bed thing, that was mine for a while. Going through a really challenging time and everything felt really big and too hard. So I basically would get out of bed, my feet would hit the floor, and then I would get up, turn around, and I would make my bed because that was the first one of the day. And I needed that win. And I knew if once I went about my day, nothing went right, nothing went good, nothing went the way I wanted it to, I got my bed made like the second I got out of it. And that felt really good. Let it be easy. Take it as a win and then build off that momentum. Because the thing is, I started that so I could have like my first one of the day super early. But really what that did was it gave me a little boost and allowed me to build momentum. So you got that little win, that jolt of excitement, okay, I got that done, I did that. And it makes it just a little bit easier to do the next thing. At least I found that to be true for me. Another thing you may consider doing is have a designated space for your self-care. So maybe if you're going to journal, do a little reflecting. Maybe there's a favorite chair that you want to sit in every day when you do your journaling. Maybe it's not so much the physical place, maybe it's the time of day. Every day at this time, this 30 minutes is for me non-negotiable. It's going in the calendar. And the thing that I need to do for myself that day, that's the time frame it's going to get done. Right? So you want to kind of create a container for your self-care. It's about making self-care less of a chore and have it feel more nurturing and supportive. So whatever container you decide on, whether it's a time frame, a physical space, allow yourself to be in that container, in that space, in that time frame without judgment. Let it be a place where you can just be without any expectations. You just ask yourself, what do I need right now? And you give yourself that. So how can you integrate self-care right now? So I've kind of mentioned a few things that I do, or a few small things that you could probably take away from this episode, but let's just break it down super simple. First one, just identify one simple self-care activity. Think of just a small thing that you can do that feels possible for you today. I do write every day, but I would say top of mind, my one simple self-care activity, that's the non-negotiable that I've been going strong with, is a walk every day outside. And just getting outside, feeling the air, having the sun on me, or even if it's still dark outside, whether it's in the morning or it's the evening and the sun's going down, just being outside and breathing in that air, and it just feels good. So for me, every day I'm going for a walk. Maybe my dog's coming with me, maybe she's not, but I'm going for a walk. Your simple self-care activity could be that. Maybe it's deep breathing. One thing I offer to my clients is putting an alarm in your phone to go off a couple times throughout the day as a reminder to just stop what you're doing and take 3 deep breaths. Because when we get stressed out, when we're grieving, when we're having a hard time, we tend to tense up, breathe shallow. We almost forget that we're holding our breath sometimes. So this little reminder allows you to check in with yourself and do the 3 deep breaths to kind of get yourself back to even. You'll feel so much better after you do it. So just to think of one thing that feels accessible to you and commit to doing it and just see how it feels. Doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be something. The second thing is I want you to practice self-compassion. The easiest way to do that is if you're beating yourself up or if you're saying something negative to yourself, is pause and ask, what would I say to a friend right now? All things even, if your friend was going through the same thing that you're going through, if your friend was having the same thought that you're having, what would you say to them? If you're being unkind to yourself, I promise you it isn't what you're saying to yourself. Because our ability to extend kindness to somebody else is so much easier than it is to extend that same kindness to ourselves. Use that question. What would I say to a friend right now? And it may sound a little hokey or odd, but unless you already do it, in which case, awesome, because I do it too. And maybe it's weird to some people, but it works for me. Talk to yourself with compassionate phrases. I'm doing my best right now, and that's enough. If you're having a really emotionally challenging day, it's okay to feel how I feel. Like, talk yourself through it. Tell yourself kind, compassionate things. And then I want you to remind yourself, self-care is a form of resilience. Self-care is what allows you to be adaptable. It allows you to stay physically, emotionally, mentally strong, even keeled, able to go through the hard thing and not completely lose yourself. So self-care is resilience, not selfishness. Truly, you deserve the same kindness you would give to others. Lastly, set up a supportive environment. And this is kind of like creating that container of self-care that I mentioned. You want to set up reminders. Maybe it's a phone alert to drink water every hour, or a sticky note on your mirror reminding you to take a deep breath. Maybe it's the reminder in your phone to do the 3 deep breaths. Whatever it is, set up a reminder somewhere you can see it, or if you have your phone with you a lot during the day, somewhere, if that alarm goes off, you're going to know it and you're going to take care of yourself. The other thing is you can reach out to someone you trust, someone you're friends with, somebody in your life that cares about you, that you care about, and let them know that you're having a really hard time and you're trying to work on self-care. Sometimes just having a little bit of support, somebody to check in with, that can make all the difference. Me, one of my best friends, when one of us is having a challenging time, we make the effort to coordinate our Peloton rides together. So maybe it's in the morning before work if one of us has a busy afternoon, or if we know we're going to have kind of clear afternoons, then might be the thing we do after our work. But we coordinate to do a few rides a week together at the same time. We choose the ride. One of us will choose it, send it to the other person. We'll pick the time, and we'll both get on the leaderboard together. That movement, it doesn't have to be the best workout of your life, but getting onto the Peloton, knowing that she's there cheering me on or vice versa, it gets me onto the Peloton to begin with. And then I feel really good while I'm doing it. And it gives us something to talk about, something to text about. And it creates connection. So I would encourage you, if you have somebody that you could check in with or somebody you could kind of sync things up with like that, could be something super small. Maybe it's somebody that you go for an evening walk with, whatever it might be. Having another person to check in with or do the activity with could just feel so supportive and make it easier to actually stick to. Sometimes creating a small ritual around taking care of yourself could make it feel really special. And that might look like maybe you're going to light a candle before you take your shower. You're going to maybe play some calming music. And when you put that music on, that starts the time that you're setting aside for yourself. Or maybe it's going to that spot, that favorite chair, that spot outside, whatever it might be, whatever container you set up, going to that physical place. And when you enter that space, that's sacred time. That's you time. And by doing this, having that reminder, that signal, it'll help your brain associate that this space or this time with care and rest. It's time for you. Once you do that thing, you're stepping into that space of care and rest. So I want to wrap this up. I don't want to give you too much, make it overwhelming, but I want to acknowledge that self-care during grief is hard, but it's also possible. It's about finding what works for you right now and taking small steps towards nourishing yourself. Small steps. Emphasis on the small steps. Doesn't have to be everything every day. Got to check in with yourself, ask yourself what you need, and give yourself that. Don't just listen to this episode and turn it off. Commit to that one small action today. Decide, if you haven't already, as we've been going through this episode, decide right now what's the one thing you're going to do for yourself today. And be kind to yourself. If you're listening to this podcast and you're grieving and you're going through something challenging, life is already hard for you right now. Let's not make it more difficult by being unkind to ourselves. So please, please give yourself some compassion. Give yourself some grace. You're doing the best that you can, even if that's not so great on some days. That's okay. I hope these tips help you feel a little more supported. I want you to take whatever resonates, leave the rest. Again, you're doing the best you can, and that is more than enough. Until next time, I hope you have a great week. That's it for today's episode, my friends. Thanks so much for joining me on the Living with Loss podcast. Please like and follow the show so you don't miss an episode. If you're looking for more grief support, grab my free guide, 5 Essential Tools for Immediate Relief from Grief, even if you don't think that's possible. Head on over to adriancrowley.com and download it. Remember, you may not have chosen all the changes or losses in your life, but you get to choose what happens next. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Until then, have a fantastic week.